Roger had never felt so alone in his life. Yes, he celebrated Christmas with his family, but he was alone. His parents had each other. His 3 siblings had their own spouses and children. But for the first time in 12 years, Roger was alone. He had divorced his wife of 11 years just 2 months ago, and now, during a season that had always been about family, he was alone. God bless his mother, 2 sisters, and brother. They went out of their way to make Roger feel loved and included. Everyone in the house knew, except his father. Emotionality was not his thing. He tried to remain calm, clapping Roger on the shoulder as his only show of emotion. Roger knew this was his best version of fatherly love. It was just as effective as what the rest of the family was trying to do. You really can be alone in a crowd, Roger thought. The family opened many gifts under the tree. Everyone oohed and ahed, laughed, and made fun of each other, as only a family can do. Roger tried his best to pretend he liked it. He didn't want to spoil it for anyone, especially his 7 nieces and nephews. Christmas is especially for children. Uncle Roger wasn't going to join in on the fun. Roger couldn't help but think about the only gift that wasn't under the tree. A gold necklace with 1.25 carats of diamonds. It wasn't under the tree because it wasn't going to be given away. About a month after Christmas, in January, he received a large sum for the necklace. It was for his then-wife, Tracy, who was the love of his life in January. It wasn't until February that he found out she'd been cheating on him for 6 months, and 2 weeks later, he hit her with divorce papers. At this point, he thought about returning the necklace for a full refund, but he simply couldn't bring himself to even look at it. Roger loved this woman with all his heart, with all his soul, and was absolutely sure that they would be together for a long time. He guessed that, in fact, there are no people as blind as those who do not see. Roger had noticed that the couple's sex life had slowed down about 6 months earlier, but he told himself it was because he and Tracy had been married for 10 years, and that was normal. What he didn't notice until further reflection was the secretive way she read her messages and never left her phone. He trusted her completely and never, ever thought that she would betray his trust. Of course, never in his wildest dreams did Roger expect someone outside his family to pronounce his last name correctly, and when it happened, he simply had to stop and talk to the man who had just done the impossible. One Thursday around lunchtime, a Tier 1 supplier dropped by unannounced, and Roger decided to impress him with a great lunch. Roger took him to the best BBQ place in town, on the other side of town, about 35 minutes away. Roger has probably only eaten there 3 times in the last 11 years, but John Steiner deserved better. When it was time to pay, Roger added his credit card to the bill, and when the waitress returned, she thanked him by name. Right. Like many Polish names, the spelling of the name has nothing to do with the pronunciation. So when she pronounced Shiksuakrat as Zikout, Roger nearly fell out of his chair. He and John looked at each other in shock. "How do you know how to pronounce it?" he asked the waitress, who appeared to be of Asian descent. "You don't look Polish at all. When you see this name 2 days in a row, you immediately remember it," she laughed. "Apparently I was serving a couple of your relatives at dinner yesterday, and I just had to ask how to pronounce the name." "Is Tracy Shiksuakrat a relative?" I didn't catch her husband's name, although the man is Ha-ah-ah-ah. They were quite a cute couple. John realized that the waitress was referring to Roger's wife, and Roger turned red as a stoplight, but controlled himself. "Yes, she's part of the family," he said. "She and her handsome husband get a little carried away sometimes, don't they? I'll say this. Sometimes I felt like I was interrupting a couple of horny teenagers. I hope I look as good as this woman when I'm in my 30s. Tracy was actually 37, but with a tight body and plenty of curves, along with flawless porcelain skin and long dark brown hair, she could pass for a late 20s. Roger guessed that Mr. Zixwakrat was actually Joey Brillian, a salesman with a full head of hair. Tracy had worked at the same insurance agency in administration since about the time she and Roger got married. Joey Brillian showed up at the office about a year ago, and Roger heard about him almost every evening after work for about 6 months. And then Tracy suddenly stopped talking about him, as if he didn't exist at all. Perhaps another clue that Roger, Mr. Trusty, missed. John and Roger drove to the office very quietly. Roger wasted no time in hiring a private detective. Within 2 weeks, investigators had obtained evidence, including video footage of the lovers having sex in Tracy and Roger's bed on Wednesday morning, an hour after Roger had left for work. The investigator warned Roger that the video was crude. But Roger, of course, was not even remotely prepared for such disrespect. "Fucking fallen woman!" Roger shouted at the computer screen as he watched what was happening in the privacy of his office after a day of work. Roger didn't hesitate to have his lawyer draft the divorce papers. A week later, Tracy was served at work. After watching a video of his wife and lover performing in his marital bed, Roger had no problem embarrassing Tracy in front of her colleagues. Roger returned home early that evening as Tracy pulled the car into the garage. She practically ran into the house and started screaming at her husband. "What the fuck are you doing? Embarrassing me in front of my friends and colleagues? And my boss, for God's sake!" she squealed. Roger sat back in his chair, sipping Lazy Boy bourbon, while the bottle sat on the table next to his chair. He calmly finished his drink and put the glass down. "Because I wanted you to feel a little bit of what I felt when I watched you and Joey Brilliant get nasty in our marital bed. At least you could tell me that our marriage is over. You shouldn't have desecrated our marital bed. And damn, don't you think I at least deserve some kind of apology?" Roger refilled his glass, and Tracy stared at him. It just occurred to her to wonder how long Roger had known and how he knew. "At least be kind enough to tell me what I did wrong and how long this has been going on," he said. "Oh, and this guy is the only one you have fun with?" "Don't be so rude, Roger," Tracy snorted. "We've been having sex for about 6 months now, and Joey is the only one. It just happened that way. You didn't do anything wrong. It just happened that way." Tracy's eyes filled with tears. Why the hell is she crying? Roger thought to himself. She was the one who was deceived, and I am the one who was deceived. "So you want to say that one fine day everything happened by accident?" "Okay, sounds plausible. Good conversation." Tracy looked at her husband with her mouth open as he poured himself another drink and calmly sipped. For some reason, it never occurred to her that her husband would find out about her affair, and if he did, how he would react. It suddenly occurred to her that she had taken terribly unceremonious advantage of her husband's love. Roger's family were as devastated as he was when they learned of Tracy's betrayal. After all, they had been married for 11 years and practically seemed like the perfect couple. The only thing missing from this perfect marriage was children. Although the couple decided to have 2 children when they were first planning their lives, Tracy continued to put off starting a family until one day Roger asked her if she was breaking their agreement. Tracy tearfully admitted that she did, and no amount of Roger's arguing could make her change her mind. It was a tense few months for the couple until Roger finally told Tracy that he would let her have her way. Mary Hewson looked sadly at her husband. Last Christmas, with its warmth and cheerfulness, seemed so far away, she thought. This Christmas, with the recent divorce of eldest daughter Tracy, seemed almost ghostly. Yes, the house was full of their second daughter's family of 6, but Tracy seemed to be walking around in a bad dream without Roger. Plus, Roger was always the life of the party when families got together. Although he and Tracy did not have children, he loved and always supported his 4 nieces and nephews. For their part, Mary and George Hewson simply adored their former son-in-law, and Tracy's feeble attempts to explain why their marriage had broken down never seemed adequate enough. Roger told his family that the divorce was Tracy's decision, and he would not discuss it further. Tracy could sense the family's tension as they spent the days together before and after Christmas. She thought that being with her family would help her overcome the malaise she felt inside, but it turned out that being with her family had the opposite effect. Everyone seemed to be waiting for a better explanation as to why she and Roger got divorced, and it seemed that her sister's children blamed her for the fact that Uncle Roger wasn't around. The Hewsons didn't invite Joey to family Christmas, and Tracy didn't fight for him to attend. She would miss his lean, muscular body next to her in bed at night, but she wouldn't have to deal with the awkwardness of him being an outsider. Realizing that only 2 months had passed since the official divorce, Joey did not particularly resist when Tracy told him that she was going to her parents for the holidays without him. Tracy was stunned when she was served with divorce papers at her place of work one afternoon in late February. She had no idea that Roger knew about her affair. She was so caught up in her personal life that she felt terrible embarrassment when she was served, and she was pretty sure she caught Joey smirking in the background. She drove home furious, but that anger turned to confusion when she ran into Roger. He was quiet and calm and seemed more interested in his bourbon than arguing with her. Plus, she knew she didn't really have any good answers to his questions. He seemed to know a lot about the case, including the fact that he and Joey had a date in the bedroom. When Roger mentioned it, she even thought it sounded tasteless. She told Roger the truth, that she didn't want this to happen. Almost every woman in the office swooned when Joey joined the staff. His appearance and charm quickly won over most of them. Tracy noted that the young man was very skilled at flirting and seemed to be very good at the game of seduction. She didn't seem too bothered when Joey started chatting with her, believing that she was immune to Joey's advances as she was completely in love with her husband. A casual lunch turned into a casual dinner as Tracy told her husband several times that she had to work late. She admitted to herself that she enjoyed Joey's company and that the man was certainly handsome. At the fifth dinner, the couple found themselves in a hotel room, and Tracy hesitated for only a minute before she found herself underneath Joey. More than once she had pleasure during sex. Tracy knew that this would not be the only time for the two of them. Tracy was somewhat surprised that she wasn't overcome with guilt as the two of them washed up and got dressed. She felt fine physically and was not too worried about her husband. Completely satisfied with her young stud, Tracy refused to have sex with Roger. Joey's youthful enthusiasm, his overall strength and sexual stamina, combined with the illicit nature of what they were doing, kept Tracy hot and willing to go for as long as the young man wanted. Then the two of them hugged, talked, and laughed. It may not have been intentional, but the longer they were together, the closer Tracy became to Joey. Because Roger always trusted Tracy and gave her space, she felt no pressure in her relationship with Joey. The two have never been open publicly about their relationship and have always been discreet about their dates, except for the occasional use of Tracy's marital bed, at Joey's request. The young man found it extremely arousing to make out with Tracy in her marital bed, and confident that they wouldn't get caught, Tracy had to admit that she found it arousing too. Once Tracy got used to being serviced, she and Joey started spending more time together, and not just about sex. In his strong arms, she found peace and security, as she once did in Roger's arms. She was surprised at how easy it was to forget her husband. Joey Brillian missed Tracy when she went to her parents for Christmas. The couple began their romance more than a year ago and grew closer when Tracy's husband, Roger, filed for divorce in February. The divorce became official in October, and Joey and Tracy were considering moving in together. They talked about having Joey accompany Tracy to her parents, but Tracy decided to go to her parents alone after her mother told her that her lover was not invited or welcome. Joey was actually fine with this because he wanted to spend some time partying with his friends, and that probably wouldn't happen if Tracy was around. If he was honest with himself, Joey hadn't planned to be with Tracy that long, but she was a beautiful woman and damn good in bed. When he first stalked her at work, he knew she was married, but he had never cared before. He seduced several married women. He just didn't plan anything long-term. The plan changed when Tracy's clueless husband apparently stopped being clueless after about 6 months and filed for divorce. Joey couldn't believe that Roger had essentially just abandoned his wife without putting up a fight. Joey couldn't figure out whether Roger was stupid or cowardly, and discussing the question with Tracy didn't bring him any closer to an answer. The strippers were in full swing, and the party was good the night before Christmas Eve. Joey left his friends around 1 a.m., accompanied by a pretty blonde who had been drinking with Joey and his friends for several hours. "This damn guy is so good-looking that women just can't keep their hands off him," one of Joe's friends said to another. "I bet this girl is half the age of his usual girlfriend." The men chuckled. It's been almost 5 years since Roger last saw Mary Hewson. He always liked Mary and George. They had been very kind to him all these years and had nothing to do with what their daughter did. Roger still sent birthday and Christmas cards. When Roger entered the Italian restaurant, Marie was already sitting at the table. Although she and George lived an hour south, she asked Roger to meet her at one of his favorite restaurants near the apartment he had moved into after his divorce. Mary's eyes watered at the thought of divorce. Roger was a great guy, and even now she couldn't understand what Tracy had done. When Roger approached the table, they hugged. "It's been too long, Roger," Marie said. "George and I and the rest of the family missed you. We love you, Roger, and nothing Tracy has done will change that." "And I love all of you guys," Roger replied. "Sorry for being so far away from you. We understand, son. Everything is fine. But I have a selfish reason for wanting to see you. Remember Tracy's cousin Bunny, the youngest of her bridesmaids, who joined the Air Force shortly after the wedding? Well, she's returned to civilian life and just got a job at an aerospace firm in your city. I was hoping you could show her around town, introduce her to the right people, and just point her in the right direction. Honestly, I'm not asking for anything more." Roger smiled wryly at his former mother-in-law. She feigned surprise. "It was a request to either you or my daughter. And now neither George nor I take much pleasure in the way Tracy leads her own life, let alone helping someone else start a new one." Roger nodded in agreement. Enough said, he thought. A few days later, Roger called Bunny and invited her to lunch at the same restaurant where he met Mary. He didn't really know what to look for because the last time he saw Bunny, she was a thin, blonde, freckled 19-year-old girl getting ready to join the Air Force. She was now 36 years old. The only hint Mary gave him was that Bunny no longer had freckles and his hair was darker. Roger waited attentively while the waiters escorted 3 lonely brown-haired women to other tables. The 4th brown-haired girl turned out to be Bunny. Roger was more than surprised. It was well built from top to bottom. Roger thought that her time in the service had undoubtedly enriched the woman physically, and that her sparkling blue eyes would make her the favorite of single men throughout the city. Roger thought the lunch had gone well. Bunny turned out to be very smart and more than held up her end of the conversation. Roger reminded himself to call Mary and thank her for connecting him with Bunny. Roger enjoyed Bunny's company so much that he invited her to lunch again, and then to dinner and a concert. He definitely needed to thank Mary. Tracy was sitting at a restaurant table, waiting for her boyfriend. At 43, she was still a beautiful woman with a tight, curvy body thanks to regular visits to the gym. Her companion was a 50-year-old accountant. She was looking forward to a pleasant, if nondescript, evening. Now she happily accepted pleasant things. After the divorce, Tracy thought her relationship with Joey was heading in a positive direction, perhaps toward marriage. The sex was amazing, and her emotional feelings for Joey continued to grow. However, about a year after the divorce, Tracy noticed that both sex and emotional attachment to Joey had leveled off. She often wondered if the sexual decline was due to the fact that sex was no longer illegal. Regarding her emotional decline, Tracy often recalled her marriage to Roger. She missed the little things she shared with Roger, the light touches, the sweet nothings he whispered to her after sex and over breakfast. She and Joey often shared time, living in each other's apartments, but that feeling of closeness just never came. Tracy began to suspect that Joey was dating other girls. The couple didn't discuss being exclusive, but Tracy suggested it would happen after the divorce. When the burning pain in her private parts confirmed that it was an STD, Tracy realized that her suspicions were confirmed. "You damn bastard!" Tracy yelled at Joey when she received confirmation. "For your sake, I refuse to marry a good man." Joey couldn't find anything to object to. He just grinned across the table. A light came on above Tracy's head. 2 years later, her STD long since cured, Tracy stood up to greet her beau and gave Fred Myers a chaste kiss on the cheek. As she leaned in for a kiss, she noticed that Fred had Frederick Mull aftershave, the same expensive aftershave that Roger always used. She hadn't thought about Roger for half a day, she chuckled to herself. Joey definitely enjoyed having sex with Roger's wife. She was more beautiful than most of the wives of other men he had been with, and she was a great lover. So many women just lay there like dead fish. Tracy was not one of them. She also seemed to enjoy illicit sex. Joey noticed that the excitement began to wane when Roger filed for divorce from Tracy, but her emotional dependence on him seemed to grow. At first, Joey enjoyed the intimacy, but then began to perceive it as a big burden. After he had been exclusive with Tracy for about 2 years, the itch for other women began to rear its head. From time to time, he secretly met with other women, but since he preferred sex without a saddle, he soon contracted syphilis. Before he had time to tell Tracy, she herself found out that he had conveyed his problem to her. She was unhappy about getting the STD and what the disease meant for the couple's relationship. Joey didn't lose a moment's sleep over his breakup with Tracy. It was a huge party to celebrate Roger and Bunny's 25th wedding anniversary. Roger surprised his wife by renting a party room at his favorite restaurant and inviting friends and family, including the couple's 23-year-old son, Daryl, and 21-year-old daughter, Abigail. No one was surprised by the role of his former mother-in-law. 5 years after Roger divorced Tracy, Mary asked him to help Tracy's younger cousin, who was returning to town after serving in the Air Force. The dinner turned into a relationship. Roger learned that Bunny was divorced. "You set me up, Mom," Roger said with a wry smile when he met Mary after he found out about Bunny. "It was a really good plan, Mom." Mary smiled widely and chuckled. Roger looked confused. "That wasn't the plan, Roger." "I swear," Mary said quietly. "I just asked you for a favor. I never expected it to last. I knew that after the divorce you hardly date, but I never thought... I can't tell you how happy George and I are. You know we've always thought highly of you and love Bunny to death. We know you will do right by this girl, just as you always did right by Tracy when you were married." "Wow, Mom, you're in a bit of a hurry now, aren't you?" "I don't think so, Roger," Mary answered. "You two look great together. She captured your heart, didn't she?" "You know me well, Mom." "So let's say this actually happens. Who should I call Mom, you or your sister Grace? What about both of us? Grace may deserve the title, but it would hurt me incredibly if you called me anything else after all these years." Mary was right, Roger admitted to himself. Bunny had her heart, and about 13 months after their first dinner, the couple tied the knot. No, Tracy was not invited, by mutual agreement of Bunny and Roger. Mary and George mentioned this neglect only once, which meant that they understood everything. A year later, Roger had his first child, and 2 years later his second. After each birth, he thanked Bunny with expensive jewelry. Roger and Bunny were on the dance floor 2 hours after the party started. Her head was resting on Roger's shoulder, and she was nestled in his arms when Roger suddenly stopped moving and looked deeply into his wife's eyes. He rummaged in his pocket and pulled out a small box that had once held a diamond necklace. Roger returned to the jewelry store, where he bought the necklace many years ago, and exchanged it for a pair of diamond earrings. This time he was sure that he would have the opportunity to give them to his wife. Eventually, Tracy found a man to grow old with. She was 52 years old when she married Franklin Jameson, a widower with 2 grown children. She admitted to herself that, even though Franklin wasn't anything special, at this point in her life she probably wouldn't find anyone special, and would be happy with a good man who loved her with all his heart. In her most intimate moments, Tracy admitted to herself that she abandoned her special person because of her own selfishness and stupidity. She fell in love with Joey's good looks, his youth, and her own lust, mistaking lust for love like a stupid schoolgirl. Even though she had 11 good years with Roger, he didn't cut her any slack once he found out she was cheating. Who was she kidding, she thought to herself. She was too focused on the intense feelings she was getting from illicit sex to realize what she was really risking. Her parents loved Roger like their own and tried to make Tracy see the truth about what she was doing. It took her more than 2 years to admit to herself that she was thinking with her head below the belt. Getting an STD was a devastating experience for a woman who believed she was in control of the situation. Roger's marriage to her younger cousin Bunny was a blow to Tracy, especially when she learned that it was her mother who brought them together. "She's part of the family, Mom." How could you do this to me? Set her up with my ex. He left me for God's sake, Tracy whined. You deserve to be abandoned, Mary shouted to her daughter. You cheated on him. I would divorce your ass for that too. Whose side are you on, Mom? You should be on mine. You're my mother. No, I cannot put up with deception. I raised you better, Mary said quietly. Roger deserves a good woman, even if she's your cousin. Why didn't Bunny even invite me? She was one of my bridesmaids, Tracy said. She respected Roger's wishes, Mary said. I think everyone agreed that his feelings matter much more than yours. Considering that Roger, Bunny, and Tracy lived in the same city, their paths sometimes crossed. Roger was polite at best when he met Tracy. The cousins hardly did more than glare at each other. Joey eventually settled down and got married. His choice of women was no longer the same as before. His robbery when he was about 35 left him with a permanent limp, and his once dense, muscular body degenerated into a doughy one. His pattern seemed to be losing its influence on women as his physical condition deteriorated. In his more reflective moments, Joey knew he had no better options when he hit 40. He settled on an average woman with an average body who seemed to really love him. Even when he was out and about, the women didn't seem as nice as they had a few years ago. The police questioned Roger and Tracy after Joey was robbed. Detectives were convinced that the robbers took too much pleasure in hurting Joey rather than robbing him. As she had expected, no one questioned Mary Hewson about the attack on Joey. After all, why would the police suspect a sweet, gray-haired grandmother? Mary guessed correctly. Although she blamed Tracy for her own mess, she knew that Joey was at least partially to blame for the destruction of Roger and Tracy's marriage. So he deserved some of the punishment. Although she didn't tell either Roger or Tracy her intentions, she figured they would both agree. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.